Okay, I think that's time to begin. Hello and welcome to New Directions East Asia 2021. This breakout session is entitled A Greener Way, Completing a Test Scale Linking Project Online. And the presenter is Dr. John Hill. We really do have an assessment celebrity with us today. John is a lecturer in the Department of Linguistics and English Language at Lancaster University, and is currently Director of Studies for the MA program in Language Testing, an excellent program, if I do say so myself. John's research interests lie in areas such as testing language for specific purposes, speaking assessment, and test impact. If you have any questions for John today, just type them into the chat box during any time of the session. We'll have 10 minutes or so at the end where these questions can be addressed. I'm now going to hand over to John. Feel free to start sharing your screen whenever, John. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Can you hear and see the right things?
Yes, can hear and see everything. Yep.
Thank you. So the title of the presentation is A Greener Way, Completing a Test Scale Linking Project Online. And thanks to the conference organizers for this opportunity. So today I'm representing the researchers who carried out the project. My colleagues are Tineke Bronfo and Luc Harding. And this talk is about the linking process. I won't be reporting any results of the test scale linking work. So first of all, and very briefly, what is test scale linking and why do we do it? A scale in this context is a framework that describes levels of ability in one or more languages and across different aspects of language use, like listening comprehension, speaking, reading, grammatical accuracy, pragmatic ability, and so on. And perhaps the most well-known framework or scale today is the Common European Framework of Reference, CEFR. The scale levels represent a progression of learning or acquisition of a language, indicating that an individual is likely to be able to do X before they are able to do Y. And a scale might use can-do statements, descriptions of what someone can do in a language. And there's an example at the bottom. So a scale represents a view of language and language learning with implications for language teaching and assessment. Language tests are then related to a scale. We might want to claim that our test measures whether test takers have attained a particular level on the scale and in one or more aspects of language as described in the scale. So test A here for speaking and listening at a particular level. Alternatively, that our test can distinguish between test takers at different levels, again, in one or more aspects of language. So test B here for writing. Linking then is making an argument that the test measures aspects of language that are relevant to and described in the scale, and that scores on the test mean something in terms of the levels of the scale and its context of use. So in this way, then, a scale can be used to compare tests. We might want to believe that tests occupying the same space in the scale are equivalent. And comparing tests in this way and giving a test meaning in a broader context are both useful things to be able to do, although we do need to recognize the limits of this approach as well. So now I'll introduce the specific test and the scale for the linking project in this study. Trinity College London offers a suite of 12 English exams called Graded Examinations in Spoken English, GESE. The exams from grades 1 to 12 assume a progression in the test specifications, and these define performance requirements at each grade. And the headings, here you can see communicative skills, and then also language functions, coverage, accuracy, and appropriacy of grammatical, lexical, and phonological items, and fluency and promptness of response. The 12 grades are in 4 stages, and each stage has a new task or tasks added to the test format, which is an interview between a test taker and an examiner. Each exam involves speaking tasks, naturally, and at the 3 advanced grades, also a listening task. Test takers progress through the grades or choose the grade best suited to their ability currently. The scoring system does not link one GESE grade to the next, so there's no vertical scaling within this suite of exams. So when linking the grades to a scale, a framework, they are to be considered as 12 related but separate tests. Examiners give a letter grade, A, B, C, D, for each task holistically on this scale, considering task fulfillment. And then an overall result is determined based on a conversion of these letter grades into distinction, merit, pass, or fail. Of note then is that there are therefore many different performances on the component tasks that can be graded A, B, C, D, and then produce the same overall result. And there is no number-based ranking available. And it's part of the challenge of linking a test to a scale using test performances. And to help in this task, we need to use performances that represent well all aspects of the test. Trinity College London funded this research project at Lancaster University to link the GESE suite with China's Standards of English Language Ability, the CSE. So this scale was published in 2018 based on a large research project in China to set the standard for learning, teaching, and assessing English as a foreign language in the Chinese context. The CSE has 9 levels, 1 the lowest and 9 the highest, and comprises 86 subscales, generally with several descriptors at each level, as you can see on the right here. Because of features of the GESE, a speaking exam, some CSE subscales could be removed from our study, relating to reading and writing, interpreting and translation, self-assessment. However, any scales that might be seen relevant were kept, so relating to pragmatics, conversational organization, and strategies. So the task for the project was to try to link 12 GESE grades to the 9 levels of the CSE on possibly 34 scales. Test scale linking is a task that involves experts with knowledge of the test, the scale, and the context of use. The main stages are set out in the literature. A 2009 manual describes this process to relate an exam to the CEFR. And I note that as far as I know, this type of guide is not currently available for the CSE. The stages I'll focus on today are first, specification, to provide initial and essential evidence that it is appropriate to attempt to link the scale and the test, that there is a sufficient match between the two. And this is done by comparing information about the test, particularly specifications and sample tasks, with the scale and subscales and the level descriptors that comprise them. Second, familiarization, to help the panel of experts gain or refresh the knowledge they need of the test and of the scale to make their informed decisions. And thirdly, the core task, standard setting. So this is for the experts to make a series of judgments deciding on the best fit of test performances for a performance test like a speaking test to the scale. And then in our study, these decisions were reviewed through statistical analysis to determine what the most representative link was overall for each GESE grade to the CSE scale. But this work itself is not the focus for today. Conventionally, the stages of familiarization and standard setting take place in a workshop setting, often lasting several days, where the expert panel is convened to reach a common understanding of the linking task and then to carry it out consensually. However, for this project, the situation was different. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic through 2020, we realized from the start that it would be very difficult to get together for an in-person workshop, and so we planned the project differently. The specification stage was perhaps the least affected. 2 members of the research team listed all the elements of the GESE test specification for the 12 grades and then worked independently of each other to seek possible matches for them across the CSE scales. The goal being to establish the fundamental commensurability between test and scale. This work involved many different worksheets in spreadsheet software. The researchers could then compare and discuss their individual decisions and reach consensus on how the test specifications linked to the CSE descriptors. So when this work was complete, as presented partly here in a spreadsheet, it was then shared by email with 2 experts for their independent consideration. 1 expert with great experience of the test and 1 with great experience of the CSE to give their written comments. And this fed into a final version accommodating their feedback. Working in this way perhaps omitted some of the discussion that might have taken place, but it provides a very well-documented process available for subsequent review. And the consensus finding meetings between the researchers, which used video conferencing, were recorded and also provide a source of data. One result of the specification stage was an understanding of which of the CSE scales contained more descriptors that fitted with the GESE test specifications. And we used this information to decide which scales to focus on in the following familiarization stage, although we didn't remove any of the 34 scales because we wanted to give experts the option of using any of the possible scales. The familiarization and standard setting stages were run completely online and asynchronously. A major benefit of working in this way was that we were able to recruit experts without having to consider their location, their availability to attend a workshop that would have lasted several full days and taken them from other responsibilities, or travel and accommodation costs. So the selected experts were in China, the UK, and elsewhere, and they worked extensively over 3 weeks on the familiarization, that was 2 weeks, plus the Lunar New Year holiday in China, and then 4 weeks of March on the standard setting tasks themselves. The quantity of work here was substantial, but the experts could decide when to do it to meet the soft deadlines set. So one of the 16 original experts dropped out because the workload was not compatible with their other responsibilities. Engagement was through Moodle Open Learning, which provided a secure environment that the research team was familiar with, and that was accessible in China and elsewhere. Experts needed satisfactory internet access, and a second participant dropped out because this was a problem. The platform allowed us to manage access to materials, who could see what and when, and to keep everything in one place virtually, also to include video, audio, interactive tasks, and text. We could easily link audio files to the judgments made, promote discussion among the experts, and collect feedback from them at different points in the process. We could also fix mistakes quickly, making a single update online that was immediately visible to everyone. Participants could contact the research team by email and through the platform, and we made sure they got a prompt response if needed within 24 hours. For familiarization, it was important that the experts could focus on what they needed. Some knew the GESE exams well, but not the CSE, and others were familiar with the CSE, but not the GESE exams. So the familiarization involved getting to know the test specifications for the GESE and the scales for the CSE by reading them, but also using activities focusing on key aspects of the test and the more relevant scales. And here are a few examples of the drag and drop matching activities that were created. There was also an activity reviewing the format and examiner role in the GESE, and videos of benchmark GESE test performances at each grade were also available. Participants were able to mark off their progress through the materials themselves using the checkboxes on the right here, and it was useful to be able to track whether and how participants were going through the materials. Feedback collected at the end of the familiarization stage included an item about participants' confidence in what they had covered and what they were about to do, and they also provided written comments on this. Participants indicated general satisfaction with the coverage, but some uncertainty about the purpose of the linking still, and perhaps some confusion in how the test and scale was seen to relate to each other. In the standard setting stage, the sequence of the performances to be worked through was the same for everyone. Each week, there were sets of 5 performances for the same grade and for 6 grades. So all 12 grades were covered in weeks 1 and 2, and then the same pattern with different performances was repeated in weeks 3 and 4. The experts knew the grade of the performance they were linking to the scale, and for 3 performances in each set of 5, also the overall result, pass, merit, or distinction. Making decisions for sets of 5 performances at one grade together and then changing to a significantly different grade was the pattern chosen because we felt too little variety in performances might lead experts to exaggerate differences between them in their linking decisions, while too much variety, say a grade 11 performance, then a grade 6, then a grade 2, would risk making the task overwhelming, leading to erratic decisions. It was stressed to the experts, that they were not to behave as examiners. The linking task is different. And all the experts made a linking decision on all performances, so it was a fully crossed design. As you see on the right, the audio file of the test performance was embedded in the questionnaire used for data collection online. Experts recorded their overall decision, which CSE level, plus supporting information. And they also used a discussion forum each week to reflect and comment on the work and the decision made. There was a clear sequence of work for them to do, so the experience for the experts was the same in that way. But there was also flexibility within the week about when the work was done. And practically, we could see who had completed what and follow up where there were gaps as we went along. So we collected a great deal of data. The key element were these linking decisions for 120 performances by 14 experts. And this is what went into the main statistical analysis. But we also had information on which scales and particular descriptors informed each decision, questionnaires, including items about participant confidence, and more general discussion among the experts on each week's set of performances in the discussion forum. Here are some examples of the type of comments the experts made. So first on performances themselves, and this was their individual notes, which are recorded for the researchers and not for other experts to see. And these examples are quite long, but very detailed and giving a kind of an argument for why a decision was made. Some of the experts, however, wrote very little in this context. Secondly, in the discussion forum, there was discussion about how to approach the decision task. So we can see which tables they are using, the experts are using, and how they weigh up what they have collected to make a final decision. And third, also in the discussion forum, they discussed processes they developed to help them do the task. They shared tips, learnings about highlighters and how to organize various bits of paper, the scales. And it was interesting that they seemed to use printouts rather than on-screen text. So to start to summarize, there are benefits and limitations of what we learned about what we learned in this project. First of all, from the perspectives of researchers, we had access to a broad range of expert participants who had the knowledge required of the test, the scale, and the context of use. We were able efficiently to track what participants were doing, and that was done in order to support them, and also efficiently standardize our delivery into one space. This enabled us to fix errors quickly and also to extract the data in a more reliable way. I think we also were able to collect a large amount of data. I'm not sure that we would have had so many individual decisions if we'd worked in a face-to-face workshop. We wouldn't have got through the same amount of material. For the participants, the experts, they were able to work more flexibly and to plan around other responsibilities and deadlines they had. They could, to some extent at least, proceed at their own pace. And they were able to recap and review easily, going back to the familiarization materials as needed. In terms of some limitations, there was a lot of planning required, and perhaps that's not really a limitation, but we needed a definite timeline to engage with the participants and give them the materials they needed. These materials had to be well designed and user-friendly, so for example, with clear instructions and engaging. A problem possibly is also data overload, because everything was recorded permanently in text. It was easy to extract it, and we therefore have a lot more data than perhaps would be the case from marginal conversations between participants in a workshop setting. Limitations for the participants: they needed internet access and certain bandwidth. They still had to commit a significant amount of time to participate, and there were some contributors who were minimal contributors in that they did the linking task, but didn't participate much in discussion. And in their feedback, they note a lack of immediacy, which they sought: quicker responses to their questions and feedback on what they were doing, and also live discussion with other participants. So finally, some reflections. And I don't want to preempt here actual findings of the study, but I think we can claim, based on feedback from participants, that this way of working was no less effective than using conventional in-person workshops. Was there evidence of shared knowledge and consensus? Well, I think we have to acknowledge this is difficult to know, and it's always difficult to know what a group of people are thinking, in person or online. Was it intentionally a green project? Well, honestly, this wasn't our main intention, but we needed to have a workable study design given the circumstances. We certainly used resources, time, infrastructure, power, but they were different from conventional resources of travel and accommodation and so on. There's no claim here that this is exceptional, but it's just how we need to work in today's world. As with comparison between online and in-person teaching, the effort and the resources are just spent in different ways. Online requires preparing materials in advance and then monitoring that things are working as intended and troubleshooting. There's also an issue that working online may lack the bonding and social side of the process, but nevertheless, there was evidence in this project of group cohesion and sharing, and an overall sense among the expert participants of contributing and learning through this process, and of doing consistent work to fulfill the core linking task. Just to finish then, there are some outputs expected from the project in the coming months, a report to Trinity College, and some publications on particular aspects of the project. And to conclude, I'd like to thank the project team at Lancaster and our project funder, Trinity College London.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you. Wonderful presentation. To all the audience members, if you do have any questions, remember, feel free just to type them into the chat box. We have about 8 minutes or so for questions. John, if you don't mind, I do have a couple of questions. I've never been involved with a linking project per se, but I am quite curious about a couple of points. So, I mean, I suppose the first general one should be with regards to future linking projects that organizations do. Do you think the way you did it, could this be the new norm in the future?
I think there is scope for that, especially with international projects where people, as we are today, working in different time zones and coming together. That's much easier to do online, as we see today, and also with at least some asynchronous work, people working independently and then sharing their ideas. I think there are large costs to getting people together for workshops in terms of taking them away from what they would normally be doing and then having a space and the accommodation and so on. In some contexts, that's manageable, but I think for this project particularly, and perhaps as an example for similar projects, then that it is hard to do that, to get people to take 3 or 4 days of their time and sort of form this group of people who make decisions. And I think we have evidence from our study that it is possible to do that online.
John Reed has just asked a question. He worries he may have missed this at the beginning, but he asks, what was the practical motivation for undertaking this study?
Right, well, I mean, for the Lancaster University perspective, we were funded by Trinity College London to do it. I think their motivation is to show the link between this set of tests, the GESE suite, with this new scale. Several of the sort of international English tests have worked to make the connection. And I think Trinity wants to be part of that group and to be able to show that their tests have validity and relevance to the Chinese context. And the way to do that would be to make these, to make a link to the new scale. The CSE very much sets out to define learning, teaching, and assessment for China and for English as a foreign language. And so we would hope to see, and I think through the study we have shown, and the other studies have also shown, that these international language tests can serve the Chinese context.
Thank you. Alan Ermston, he doesn't ask a question as such, but he does comment, he did a linking project in person, and to do it online like this is amazing. So what a nice thing to say there, Alan. I do have a couple more questions, actually. So you mentioned the familiarization part of the linking project. And I was just wondering, is there anything you would have done differently had it been face-to-face? And if so, was this missed in the online version, in your opinion?
I guess there is a kind of element of socialization and fun, let's call it even fun, doing the kind of activities that you do to get to know a test. And in a sense, the interactive activities online where you were matching descriptors with levels and so on, they could be more fun if you were doing them with someone else. You could discuss them with someone else and justify your reasons. And I guess that could be done online also, but it would certainly happen more in a face-to-face workshop. And you would learn sort of more incidentally from other people's the conversation around what you were doing. I think the participants in our study online missed to some extent that conversation. And so some of the feedback at the end of the familiarization indicated that they were still a bit unsure about what they were doing, in the sense of, like the previous question from John Reed, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this work, linking a test to a scale? And depending on where you started from, misunderstanding slightly, is the scale a kind of test, which it isn't? Or why are there 12 different grades to the test if you weren't familiar with that? So we certainly strove to iron out some of these misunderstandings and give the necessary information and sort of knowledge to the participants. But I'm not sure we answered every issue. And on the other hand, I would say, well, maybe that wouldn't ever happen. And as I was saying right at the end, I'm not sure we can ever know what other people are thinking as a group or individually. And so we make assumptions, and in a sense, doing it online and questioning whether people, or doubting perhaps more online, whether people sort of pick up everything you want them to pick up, just opens up the realization that, in fact, that happens all the time, and we're not sure what people are getting from any kind of input we give them. So it's all somewhat a black box, but I think we can measure sort of confidence, perhaps misplaced confidence in some contexts, but yeah, the confidence and the willingness to do what's being required. And then we have data from the results, you know, does the analysis work? Is it a consistent sort of set of decisions that are made by this team? Are there people who need to be excluded from the data because they seem to be applying their judgment in a different way? So we do have the statistical side, which kind of helps confirm what's been going on.
Thank you. There's about 1 minute left, so I think I'll call time. That'll bring us to the end of this session. Thank you, John. I think that presentation was just very, very clear, very easy to understand, very interesting. I was kind of curious how you found linking to the CESE compared to, say, linking to the CEFR, but that could be a big answer. We might not have time for that. Yes. But anyway, thank you again, John, for that session. To all the audience members out there, please leave us some feedback on this particular session by answering the 2 short survey questions found in the survey tab. And thank you for attending. I hope you can make it to our next 2 panel discussions, one of which will start in about 10-12 minutes time. So thank you for attending. John, thank you again for presenting, and goodbye. Bye, everyone. The live stream is usually, there's a 30-second delay, so I kind of leave the live stream going a little bit before we cut off. Mm-hmm. It's generally been good though.
Great.
Yeah, about a 30-second delay.
It seems to be going well. I hope. I mean, you must be very busy. I won't keep you, but thank you very much for moderating that and